Hello, amateurs. Welcome to another episode of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some fantastic rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got another fantastic guest for you today. This man is doing amazing things up in Scotland, helping to grow the game by being the main man at Glasgow's inclusive rugby team, the Glasgow Raptors. And he also was kind enough to host me during last year's Great Rugger Run. Please welcome Mr. Tim Abrams. Tim, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you very much. How are you?
Very well. It's good to see you, and it looks like it's a bright, sunny day up there in Scotland. How is it?
Yeah, we're having one of those traditional Scottish heat waves in May. They happen about once a decade, and they're glorious. So we're making the most of it.
Good man. Now let's start briefly, just talking about the Raptors themselves. So I'm assuming you've sort of come to the end of your season now. How's the season gone, and what kind of shape are you in?
The season's gone really well. As you say, we've wrapped up. We've wrapped up now, but we had another really successful season. We're looking really strong performances, results. Everything has improved this season on the last, as it did on the last. Numbers are still growing pretty exponentially, which is sort of one of the main things that we as a rugby club focus on is growing the game. So as long as our numbers are increasing, we're pretty happy, and that's continued to happen. So yeah, players are enjoying a well-earned break, but it's been a really good season.
Fantastic. Okay, we're gonna come back to the Raptors in much more detail later in the show. But let's talk about you, Tim, and your rugby journey. How did you start playing? How did you first get involved in the game?
Well, as you can probably tell by the accent, I'm not a local. So I grew up in the south of England, and me and my brother, who's 4 years older than me, both went to a private school in the south of England, where rugby was not an optional activity. So we got into rugby when we were around, between 10 and 12. And I played through school until about 16, when I stopped playing. But yeah, so I played as a kid a fair bit, and that's really how I got into the sport.
So you sound like you were a reluctant participant at the start. Is that the case?
No, I think I was a more reluctant participant near the end. I think at the start I quite enjoyed it. My brother and I had the benefit of being bigger than everyone else. So I think at the beginning rugby was quite fun because it was mostly just running into people who were smaller than me. But no, I think, and also my brother's 4 years older than me, so I watched him play 4 years of rugby before I even started. At which point I think I decided it looked pretty fun. So no, I think at the beginning I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got a fairly similar story actually with my rugby start. I was bigger, an older brother, all the same things. But you're alluding to the fact that it became not fun. What were the things that changed? What made it less fun for you?
Um, we got we got to an age where uh people start to grow as individuals, and my sort of way of life, or rather like just the way that I like to socialize and have fun and relax and play sports was not particularly similar to the way that like most 16-year-old rugby lads wanted to. Um, I had very little interest in like heavy drinking and initiations and a lot of like slightly unfortunate lad culture that existed. Certainly, my experience existed in private schools in the south of England at the time. And it's not universal, but it was enough to put me off and make me think that I'd prefer to go and play other sports.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously very sad that's happened. So how long were you out of the game for?
So I stopped playing at 16. I moved to Glasgow for university, so straight out of school. Um, Pretty much as within about a year of moving to Glasgow, I was playing touch rugby and I was coaching kids rugby union. Um, so I was sort of straight back in some variations of the game pretty quickly once I moved to Glasgow. I didn't play like men's rugby myself again at that point, because again well, I wasn't massively keen on it at that point, and I wasn't sure like where the right environment to play was. But I got really interested in coaching, and in the end, I wanted an opportunity to do some coaching outside of youth rugby. And the Glasgow Raptors, or the Alphas as they were then called, provided a sort of opportunity to get involved at a reasonably low level of amateur rugby, where I thought that having at least grown up in the sport, I would have the experience to be able to lend a helping hand. And that
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
4 years ago. So,
so can we just talk about the name change quickly there as we passed it, because they used to be called the Alphas. Yeah. So talk me through why the name change happened and how it came about.
There was a lot of chat inside the club and some chat with people on the outside and around the club, and I think there was a sort of just a general sense that while some people really resonated with the name Alphas, it possibly didn't have the broad appeal within the LGBT community, which is sort of the majority of our membership. Specifically because that idea of like alpha, like ultra macho stereotypes was what pushed quite a lot of people out of the sport, or at least didn't make some people feel welcome in the sport to begin with. So I think while like some people really liked the fact that they could embrace that term, there was a sort of broad agreement that it didn't have the widespread sort of approval of the whole market in Glasgow.
Yeah, that makes sense. So why Raptors? Why did the Raptors name come about?
Well, as to why, I can tell you how it came about. It came the internal membership. Basically, we went through a series of votes, of discussions, and then votes, and I think we did have quite a few different names on the shortlist. I think the Raptors came about mostly because it has that broad appeal. It's not hyper specific. It's not like a location in Glasgow. A lot of rugby clubs obviously are named for the town or village where they are based. But one of the big differences for our club, as opposed to some of these other clubs, is that our catchment area for players is massive. We have players who travel like 2 hours to training. So it didn't really make sense to have a name, like we're based in Clydebank. It didn't really make sense to have a Clydebank specific name. So we wanted something with which would be sort of relatively inoffensive and let's like kind of cool to the majority of people, and that's what the membership decided on. So
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we'll just go back a little step. What attracted you to get into coaching in the first place? What did you hope to do?
I think like so I got into kids coaching for the same reason, and then it really pushed me into adult rugby, and specifically the Alphas at the time, is that I really love sport. Like anyone who knows me will tell you, like I'm fairly obsessional about sport. I spent yesterday multi-screening Formula One and the Barbarians versus World 15. And then I spent Saturday watching the URC final and the Prem final, and also some football. I don't remember what football I was watching, but I'm a fairly obsessional sports enthusiast, and sport in general, not just rugby, but sport in general has given me a lot in my life. I really love playing sport. It's like my favorite thing to do. And it just makes me a bit sad when I hear about people who don't have that engagement or involvement with sports. And some people have tried it; it's not for them, and that's totally, that's totally fine. People have the free will to do what they do with their pastime. But what really bothers me is when people don't feel like they even had the opportunity to be involved in a sport. and so that was really my gut feeling what was pushing me into coaching. And to be honest, it's been entirely borne out through my experience with the Raptors, because I have now listened to literally dozens of people say to me the exact same thing, which is, I've never played a team sport, or like I've never really been interested in sport. And now they come to training twice a week and they play on a Saturday and they're absolutely obsessed. And people, and it sounds corny, but like people will describe it in pretty life-changing ways. And that's how I feel about sport. And it's just really nice to be able to facilitate other people's engagement with rugby in the same way.
Yeah, amazing. That's I mean, you've clearly sort of told us your why for doing this there. It sounds incredible. So when you arrived at the Raptors, what was the club looking like? What kind of shape was it in? How many numbers of players, and what were the challenges at the time?
So the club was pretty small. There were maybe at each training session we maybe averaged between sometimes we had like double figures, but often it was maybe just like 8 or 9. And as I say, sometimes if we're outside, the weather was good, it was more, but it was pretty limited. And it was a pretty tight knit group of friends, from what I could tell. They'd all been at the club for a while. They all knew each other. But it was pretty, yeah, it was pretty small. And so the main challenge really, I mean, is pretty obvious, which is that it's difficult to run a rugby club with 9 regular training members. So the immediate challenge was to get more people into the club. And so that was pretty much like the raison d'etre for everything we were doing for the first like 2 years of my involvement. Was just like we need to get ourselves out there more, and then we need to get other people in the door. And if we can do that, then we can start to build sort of the foundations of a really successful rugby club.
Yeah, and how did you go about that, Tim? What were some of the tactics that you used?
Well, one of them was the rebrand that we've already talked about. I do think that was pretty significant, as I say, just in terms of broadening our appeal. And then the other one was just a pretty regimented training schedule, which people kind of could know, like where they were training every week. We moved training base completely. We used to split training Tuesday, Thursday in 2 different locations, and one of them was Tuesdays was indoor, which I wasn't really a big fan of. So almost immediately after I joined, we moved completely to Clydebank Rugby Club, who we ground share with now. I think that helped. And then the other thing that we did is start these, or they had actually done them before I was arrived, but really push these summer boot camps that we run every summer, and really, really drive recruitment just to get people in the door, and really emphasize the fact that we didn't expect anyone turning up to our rugby training sessions or our boot camps to have any rugby experience whatsoever. And from now on, we were going to facilitate like learning from absolute scratch. And by really pushing that message through word of mouth and on social media and things like that, we've had a huge amount of success in getting absolute first-time rugby players into the sport. Our most recent boot, I would struggle to speak to boot camps from 3 years ago, although the numbers were very good. But our most recent boot camp, which was last summer, we had, I think, 35 people along to boot camp in total. And I think 28 of them, if I'm not mistaken, signed up for membership. So that's the sort of summer recruitment we're talking about. It's like, for considering the unfortunate reality that some rugby clubs are facing at the moment in terms of recruitment, that is an enormous success that we're very proud of.
Yeah, rightly so. I think you've identified sort of one of the major blockers for new players coming into rugby, especially adult rugby, is that they just feel like there's so much to learn and they'll be holding other people back, things like that, which obviously a summer boot camp aimed at complete beginners solves in one hit. Also, they've got a lot of other people there who are in exactly the same shoes as them. Talk me through it, Tim. What do you do on the boot camp? What does it look like? How long is it? What activities do you do?
So it's pretty intensive, and it shows that those people who actually really commit and come to all the sessions come out at the end of it as decent rugby players. It's 8 weeks long, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and we run kind of between an hour and a half and 2 hours. So it's a lot of by the end of the 8 weeks, if you've been coming twice a week, you've played a lot of rugby. And we start off, as I say, teaching them how to pass the ball, teaching them how to run with a ball, and then we move up, teaching people how to tackle, ruck, everything like scrum, lineouts. By the end of the boot camp, they've done absolutely everything you ever need to do on a rugby pitch. In terms of basic skills. And so by having that sort of pretty long period of time, it allows us to build up reasonably gradually. So we start from absolute scratch, and then over the 8 weeks, we start to build up the basic skills, and then we start to up the intensity a bit. We start to work on their fitness a bit, get them sort of a bit ready for what's coming, which is the contact element of the sport, and then we get them into the tackling and the rucking. I have to say, I'm supported by a really wonderful group of player coaches every year, who do a fantastic job. They know who they are. They do a fantastic job of helping facilitate those, helping with demonstrations, helping encourage folk who are a bit nervous when we first start going into proper gameplay. It's a real team effort, and I'm really grateful for those who give up their time for that.
Yeah, I'm sure it must take a lot of time and effort from a lot of people to deliver that. Tell me about some of the almost like transformations maybe that you've seen. Some of the players that have come in looking like they could possibly never be a rugby player, but then end up going and playing for the Raptors. There must be loads of stories like that.
Oh, well, I mean, there's literally dozens of them, there are so there's first of all there's kind of two pots that I put these people into. One of them is the people who turn up and they just pick the sport itself up super fast. They learn super fast. They just have good instincts. It's if we're I won't get too technical. You might appreciate it, but I'm not sure your listeners will. But things like people start like without being taught, do like good running lines and things like this, like support play. Some of the real intangibles of the sport. That some people just pick up so quickly instinctively, and that's really fun to see. And just providing those people with the environment and a little bit of pressure and stimulus to get the most out of those players is really fun. And some of those have gone on to be our best players. And even though they've only been in the club for even a year, sometimes those people turn into real leaders in the team. And we have players who, as I say, this season I've watched a player. I won't name people just in case they don't want to be named. But I've watched a player who went through our boot camp last summer. Basically give a teammate a pep talk on the pitch, like mid match. And this is someone who's been playing rugby for I think maybe 7 months at that point. I was like, well, this is perfect. I don't even have to do anything now. The players are doing my job for me. So it's really nice to see those players really take to the sport and really click. And then the other group is those who I was talking about earlier, who I try and say hi to everyone in the first week of boot camp, even though there's a lot of them. And some people, and I always ask them, "Oh, have you played rugby before? Have you played?" And some of them will say, "I've never played a team sport before." Like they've been to the gym and that's it. They've been to the gym once or twice a week for the last few years, but they've never ever played any team sports whatsoever. And I'm like, oh, and in my head, I'm thinking this will be fun to watch, because those people, in my experience, almost always are the ones who really thrive, because like we all remember what it was like to play as kids. It's a lot of fun playing games and stuff with other kids, even if it's just like made up games in your head. But watching those people do that for the first time as adults is so fun, and just watching like the joy that people have when they first get involved in like team sports environment. And again, those are the kinds of people then who you see every single training session every week for the whole season. Like some people's attendance is almost unblemished for the past 12 months. And it's often those people who have never played team sports before, and they've found out that actually it's good fun, and now they never want to give it up. And it's really wonderful to see.
Oh, mate, that sounds amazing. And is it just men's rugby that you're doing at the Raptors?
Wow, I'm going to call that a timely question, Tim. So everything we've talked about so far is men's rugby. However, as of 6 weeks ago, we have a women's union team, and we also have a touch team. It's been in the pipeline for a little while, but given that our sort of main mission is inclusivity in the sport, we felt that we weren't quite doing the job properly if we were only catering to men who are happy to play the full contact version of the sport, which is not everyone. Unfortunately. So we have finally launched, as I say, last month, our women's union team, which is going well. We've had a handful of women coming down and training every week, and then our touch team who are playing proper touch with the anticipation of sort of joining in touch competitions in Scotland and in IGR, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure, in the UK. And that's been going very, very well. We've had like 30 plus people at those touch sessions for the last 6 weeks. So we are an ever evolving, ever growing family of rugby variants.
That sounds amazing. Again, how have you found these women and girls? Are these people that have played before as well, or are they brand new to the sport also?
There's a few people I think who've played before, but it again is quite a number who've never touched a rugby ball in their lives. So I think for them it's a good opportunity to learn. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, something that you mentioned a little while back is that you're sharing a ground there, a clubhouse with Clydebank. And I'm always just so interested to hear what that's like, having essentially two rugby clubs within the same space. How does it work for you guys?
Oh, we have a fantastic relationship with Clydebank. They're great folk. Fortunately, Clydebank have fantastic facilities, including a massive 4G pitch, which is used for other sports, including Gaelic football and things, which means it's much bigger than a normal rugby pitch. So we train on the same nights, but because we have so much space, that's not really too much of an issue. But it's really good. We do some joint training every so often, especially like scrum and line out. We've done a little bit of set piece training together. We've had a few training matches. So we have as I say, really, really good relationship. They've been incredibly supportive of what we're trying to do. I couldn't really. I could imagine having problems with like a ground sharing arrangement like this, but we've not really run into any. They're really good people.
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch for that. I met a load of them when I was up there. It seemed like it was just all working very, very well, which is awesome. Something else you mentioned earlier as well, the social media side of things. What kind of role has social media played in your ability to grow the club?
Well, my colleagues at the rugby club and my friends will tell you that social media is not exactly my forte. But as I understand it, our social medias are pretty widely followed. In comparison to other local rugby clubs, we have pretty substantial followings on particularly Instagram and Facebook. And I think when I talk to boot campers especially, it seems to be that many of them are finding out about us through our social media. So I can only imagine that means that we're doing a good job. As I say, you're slightly talking to the wrong person when you ask for social media metrics, uh, but it seems to work well based on the responses that I get from boot campers when I ask them how they found out about us. So.
Okay, great. So we'll just encourage people to go and check out your social media channels as well, which we'll share towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, then, what in terms of actual playing matches and games and competitions, who do you play against? Because obviously you've alluded there's a lot of very new players. Are you in the league structure yet? What are you doing exactly?
So we're currently not in a league structure. That is being explored as of this very minute. So next season this may be different. But this season we didn't play in a league structure. Instead, what we do is me and the fixture secretary work really hard to make sure that we schedule matches throughout the season against opposition of a sort of reasonable strength. Trying to get some fixtures against teams that are about our level, and then some fixtures against teams that are a bit better. Because as coach personally, I quite like playing against those teams that are slightly stronger than us. It gives people a lot of encouragement as to like see where the next step for us is personally, and also see that we're not actually that far off. So we play against quite a lot of local second teams. We play like Clydebank seconds, Cumbernauld seconds, Bishopton seconds, these sorts of teams. We have some really good relationships now with rugby clubs around Glasgow who know us very well. And so that's sort of one pot of fixtures. And then the other is teams against matches against other inclusive rugby teams around the UK as a whole. There are teams in Edinburgh and Aberdeen, and then all over England and also in Ireland and Wales. So we play a fair number of fixtures and also tournaments against teams around the country in those senses as well.
Fantastic. So does that involve some quite lengthy away trips as well then?
It does, yeah, yeah. Some of the traveling is pretty long. I didn't manage to attend, but the Raptors went over to Cork in Ireland in January from fixture against the Hellhounds there. Um, and we've gone down to Manchester and Sheffield were our other two away games that we went to, and then we have a couple of big tournaments that we do every year. There's a tens tournament hosted by the Newcastle Ravens that we always attend. It's one of our favourite events of the year. Who doesn't love tens? And so we went down to that, and then there's a tournament in Edinburgh hosted by the Thebans in October that we always go to as well. So some really good opportunities to play rugby against the other inclusive sides, and then also have a bit of a party.
Absolutely. I was going to say there must be such. I mean,
there's a lot of partying.
No doubt. So these tournaments are they under the IGR banner? Is that what they are?
Yeah, so they're hosted by other IGR clubs. So IGR, for your listeners, is Inclusive Gay Rugby, although there is a rebrand on that front, maybe coming soon. But at the moment it stands for Inclusive Gay Rugby, and it's just the sort of umbrella organisation that helps govern inclusive rugby teams all around the world. Obviously, we're still official, at a top level, governed by the SRU, just like the English clubs are governed by the RFU. But we have a sort of secondary affiliation with IGR. And so these tournaments are, sort of partly organised by IGR, with obviously the host club doing the majority of the heavy lifting on that front.
Yeah. Now, what's the timeline been like for inclusive rugby clubs? Like, what's the kind of? It sounds like it's growing for sure, but how quickly and whereabouts?
So now we're delving into the archive. So King's Cross Steelers, based in London, were the first inclusive rugby club. I believe that they were founded in 1995. And then the Manchester Village Spartans were founded in the late 90s. I'm not going to put a year on it because I'll just embarrass myself. Maybe 98. There you go. I've done it now. But in the late 90s, and then it was pretty. It was pretty sort of in the late 90s. There were clubs popping up all over the place around the world, especially in America as well. But really, in the last 10 years, there's been an exponential explosion in the number of clubs. I mean, like many new clubs starting every year all around the world. In the UK, there are new clubs that I hear about like every few months at this point. Um, so there's a pretty significant upward trajectory when it comes to inclusive rugby, which is really nice to see because at the end of the day, all of these clubs are providing an opportunity for people who don't otherwise feel that they have one to play the sport. So every club that you see popping up like this is just another dozen or 2 dozen people getting to play the sport that we all love.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Now, so what's next for the Raptors? What are your next big goals? You've mentioned women's rugby, potential league membership. Is there anything else beyond that?
So we have beyond that we've got some other interesting things that we're doing. We have some really cool partnerships that we've formed over the past. Well, some of them date back a few years, but especially over the past 6 months. With other organisations that also push inclusivity in rugby. So one of them that we've gotten really close to recently is the School of Hard Knocks. And so we now have, since about January, we've been working really closely with them to provide support in a couple of senses. One of them is that we play practice matches against their players who are going through the boot camps that the School of Hard Knocks run. And then the Raptors as a club are also providing a space for people who graduate through those School of Hard Knocks boot camps to continue their rugby journey and keep playing. And the School of Hard Knocks will now say to their players, "Oh, the Glasgow Raptors is a good place for you to go and carry on playing if that's what you want to do. It's a good environment. It's supportive. It's well coached for beginners rugby." So that's a really exciting partnership, and it's really nice, I think, and important for the organisations that are really pushing hard for the inclusivity in rugby to make sure that we're working together. And then we also have a slightly older relationship dating back a few years, but a rekindling one with Trust Rugby International, who provide a space for people with like learning difficulties or like disabilities to play rugby. And so we are also looking at ways that we can help support them in what they're doing, whether it be again through some joint training, practice matches, that sort of thing, and really support them so that they can do the best job that they can do. So I'm personally really excited about those opportunities to strengthen the bonds with other elements of inclusive rugby circles. From a competitive point of view, we also have a really exciting event coming up in August where we're hosting our own tournament called the Celtic Cup, with other IGR teams from around the country coming up to play. So that's super exciting. That's on the second penultimate weekend in August, and we're really looking forward to that. So that's the next big thing on the calendar.
Amazing. Tell me more about the Celtic Cup. How many teams are coming up? What's the format going to be?
So there are 8 teams, and the format is currently being brewed in my brain. But it will be a pretty classic rugby format of pool stages and then knockouts, with, as you may have guessed, plenty of partying before, during, afterwards. So it'll be a whole weekend event, Friday night to Sunday. We really want to show off what we've been doing as a club in terms of the inclusive rugby, but also give people a fun weekend in Glasgow because it's an awesome city and people have a good weekend, I'm sure.
Where did you find the time, Tim, for all this organising, all this coaching, all this everything that you're doing there?
I fit it in somewhere around the law degree. I don't really know how, but it happens somehow. Yeah, it's a good question. No, what I would say is that my life as coach is made much easier by the fact that at the club now we have a huge number of incredibly dedicated and really hardworking people on the committee, and then also captains, vice captains, senior players people who are really happy to step up and make things happen. And I think going back to when we were talking about the early days or when I joined the club, one of the reasons it was important to get people in the door is that it's just so much easier to make exciting things happen when you have a bigger group of people and you can spread the load a bit more. Like it allows us to do other things. Like we've been trying to push like club volunteering opportunities this year. We've done some volunteering at the Prince and Princess of Wales Hospice in Glasgow. We've got a massive event coming up um, in June, at the end of June, which is our drag night, which is the second year we're doing it. This is players putting on a drag performance at Slay in Glasgow. You can find your tickets online if you go to our social medias. But those sorts of things are only possible when you have a really big group of people who are really dedicated to pushing every facet of the rugby club. So I do put in a lot of effort and a lot of time, but I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people behind the scenes working really hard. So
Yeah, that sounds cool. Now, a thing I hear a lot at many rugby clubs is it's the same few people doing everything. It sounds like you've managed to, excuse me, you've managed to achieve to get a lot of people doing a lot of things. Can you put your finger on how you've managed to do that?
I think so. I would have to be speaking to other people's motivations, which I'm slightly nervous doing. But I certainly I think one of the things that's happening is that other people see the same thing that I see in the rugby club, which is that it's a vehicle for people to have a good experience in rugby and in sport in general, and find a community that's really welcoming and fun and supportive and challenging and on the pitch as well. Um, and so there is a kind of investment from people to want to make that environment the best that it can be, so that the next people who join also get a really good experience. So I think there's a lot of buy-in from our current membership to push the club as far as it can go. And and we have a hard-working committee, but as I say, we have people off the committee who are constantly offering to like do this particular thing, like really work really hard on like this, on like the drag night, for instance, on this particular charity event we want to do. So we have a lot of people who it's really obvious care a lot about the rugby club, and really want to push it to be the best that it can be. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds like you've got a very sort of positive atmosphere within your club. So we'll bring this part of the show to a close now. We'll move on to the stash section, Tim. So what's your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
Oh well, what I would say is that I'm very lucky to have a team who give me a lot of grief during the season, and then at times like Christmas, they suddenly present me with gift vouchers to SIU rugby stores. So I have a huge quantity of Scottish rugby gear. Um, I do have a Glasgow Warriors top signed by the this season's entire match playing squad, which I'm very fond of. Um, and I also have some lovely Glasgow Raptors stash, which is also very nice. Some nice gold and black zip necks and polos and the like. So yeah, I have a lot of stash as a result of the rugby club.
Oh, good stuff. So next question, what is your favourite kit of all time? So this can be any team from any era.
Oh my God, my favorite kit of all time. Oh, you've just like broken my brain. There's too many. Um, I mean, I'm really fond of the incredibly traditional Harlequin, the never changing Harlequins kit. I'm a big fan of the quadrants, I have to say. So the Harlequins kit, I am a big fan of. I tell you what, Ulster this season have a lovely third kit. It's like a burnt orange yellow color that is really some kit. And then there's a classic Bristol kit from when I was a kid. Um, uh, the sort of like dark blue with the white stripes across that I also remember. That's also a good one. But there are
Wow.
too many. You asked me that question, and there's like 10,000 sports kits flood my brain at the same time. Fiji have some amazing stash from the last 2 years. Some absolutely incredible stash, Fiji.
Good stuff. I've never had 4 answers to that question before. That's impressive. Well done. And what about awful kits? Are there any kits that you think are really disgusting and should be burned?
Well, I'm not. I'm not. I don't know if you watched the Barbarians versus World 15 yesterday, but World 15 were wearing. That might be the worst rugby kit I've ever seen in my life. It genuinely might be. It was properly awful. Yeah, I don't really have any words for that. Well, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. I don't know who signed off on it, but thank God that wasn't the Barbarians kit, and we hopefully never have to see that thing again because that was absolutely horrendous. Sales kit
I
last year,
couldn't
by
agree
the way.
more.
Sales kit last year was absolutely awful as well. Maybe it was the same person.
Yeah, that World 15 kit. I mean, it was gaudy. It was disgusting. Yeah, I completely agree. And then also being paired against the Barbarians, which is one of the better kits you'll ever see. Like it just made the contrast even worse. Okay, we'll bring this towards a close now, Tim. But is there anything else you want to add or share? Any closing thoughts at all?
I don't think so. I think I've talked about. I don't think the chairman or the social media manager or anyone is going to shout at me. I think I've mentioned everything that I'm obligated to mention. If you just keep an eye on our socials that I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. We've got lots of exciting stuff coming up. We're really happy to have new people coming along to watch, support. You can come watch our drag event in June. It'll be a blast.
That sounds amazing. If people want to get a hold of you, Tim, how would they best do that?
You can find me on Twitter. As I may have alluded to, social media is not a place I frequent. But if you want desperate to find me on Twitter, then you can find me at Tim Klevmark, which is Klevmark, and that's where you can find me. My actual username is Tim Klevmark Abrams. But so if you're desperate to talk to me about something, you can find me there.
Okay, and if people want to find the Raptors, where's the best place for them to do that?
The Raptors are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, I think everywhere else, at Glasgow Raptors RFC. Have a very responsive set of social media accounts. If you want to join up, you can send us a message. If you want to come along to an event, you can send us a message. If you want to ask us questions, you can send us a message. So yeah, Glasgow Raptors RFC on all good social media accounts.
Amazing. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll link all of that up in the show notes below, which you can find in one place, amateurrugbypodcast.com. So it just leaves me to say, Tim, thanks so much for this awesome time today and everything you're doing to grow the game that we love.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Alrighty, there he goes. Thanks again, Tim, and thanks for putting me up when I was up there in Glasgow. Very, very kind of you there, and just all the amazing work you're doing to grow the game. Something I say often on the podcast is I just want rugby to be available to everybody that wants to play it whenever they want to play it, and I think you're doing an amazing job there, Tim, in bringing it to new audiences. So fantastic. The Great Rugby Run training is really getting on now. I am running myself to a standstill almost every day in preparation for 1,000 kilometres, 1,000,000 metres across the south of Wales and into Gloucestershire for the My Name's Doddy Foundation on this year's Great Rugby Run. August 9th to September 2nd. You can find out everything and support if you can at thegreatruggerrun.org. And like the Glasgow Raptors, the podcast is active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So go and give me a follow over there if you haven't already. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can rate and review on your podcast player, like, share, retweet, all that jazz, or even join the community over at Patreon on patreon.com/amateur rugby podcast. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. So until then, get out and play.